Hello and welcome to News of Faith podcast, brought to you by Reverend James Wesley from Worldwide Online Ministry. Check us out at worldwideonlineministry.com. To be on this podcast, send an email to rev.jamesw@yahoo.com.
This is my grandpa's talk show.
Hello, James.
Yeah, this is James. This is Robert?
Yeah, this is Robert Earl Woodard. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good there. How's everything where you're at?
We're having nice weather up in North Alabama today. We're having a good day.
Wow, a good day in Alabama. That's good to hear that, because they've been having some different kind of weather up in there.
Been real cold, but weather can change quickly in Alabama.
Oh, yeah. That's a bad thing about being down here in southern southwest Florida. The weather stays the same year round. But, I'm from Ohio. I've lived up there for all my life, Ohio and Illinois. And, every season the weather changes, and I kind of miss that.
Yeah, you know what cold weather's like.
Oh, yeah, we used to. Yeah, well, let's get into something here. Let's let people know what you are, who you are. We know who you are, but you wrote a book on. This book was let's see, back in the day. How did you say that?
The way it was back then.
The way it was back then. Yeah. So now they know that you've got a book of that. I can tell you, that in the cold weather, I used to have to go out, and we had some chickens and pigs, and we had a little calf and stuff, and we had an old coal stove, and I had to go out and feed them, in the morning and night. And that cold weather, it's something you get used to if you have to get out and work in it all the time. But
that's what we're talking about. The way life was way back then, it's a lot different.
Oh yeah.
Today.
Yeah, you get up there before daylight, and I remember I had to take a little kerosene lantern with me because didn't have no street lights out there in the country. It was fun though. So let's hear a little bit about your book. That's what I wanted to contact you about anyway, and we'll just let you talk about your book there for a while and let people know what's so exciting and interesting about this book, because I got interested in it when you started telling me about it, and I thought, well, I've got to have him on the episode to explain to the listeners.
Well, we're certainly glad to be with you today, and you already touched on a few of the points that got my interest into writing the book, the way it was back then. Like you talking about, you put coal in the stove early in the morning, which that's the life that people back then was just ordinary and normal as everyday part of survival that people don't have to do today. We just moved the thermostat today, but yes, it was. My interest was the young generation did not know, or they could not understand, but us just telling them how we used to live long ago. So I set out to write a story, and I wanted to put the stories in a book so that when the younger generation would read the book, that when they finished the book, they would have a feel of the way it was back then. Obviously, I put a lot of the ways of we survived before modern technology and all the modern conveniences we have today. And along with my book, I also added a lot of my adventures. Had the excitement of being raised up right on the Locust Fork of the Warrior River, and in my young days, our entertainment was to go to the river. And I wrote a lot of stories about the adventures along the Locust Fork of the Warrior River. And we also put a lot of our fishing stories in the book. So I have 37 short stories, and there's a story in my book for everyone. And a lot of the people, of the older generation that can go back and they relate to some of my stories, because most everyone will say, that's how we had it. And, we all had about the same, and we all had a lot in common. but we were real happy, and we did not go hungry because we worked and put our food on the tables, and we canned our food for the winter time, and so we was prepared to always have food available. So it tells a lot about the way life and the way the family survived for about over 100-year period, the last 100 years, starting from my grandfather all the way up to even when I was a young boy, and because for about 3 generations it did not really change much, all the way up until the car became very popular, and the people was able to start buying cars. Before then everybody was traveling on horse and a wagon and stuff, but all of that changed rapidly, in the 50s and the 60s.
Yes, it did. I remember when I was growing up, my dad, he'd always had this saying that, I remember back when you could buy bacon for 60 cents a pound. He was complaining about, because the bacon was like, I don't know, I think it was like $2 a pound then. But he don't never remember the day he had to work for that 60 cents. You had to work all day to make anything. But then they overlooked that because labor was not a thing that you included in on your income. It seems like, today, I want $30 an hour to sit at this desk and answer the phone. Well, how'd you like to work $30 a week, for full labor for $30 a 40-hour week? Yeah.
In this book, I write about how my grandfather was planning on paying for a 120-acre farm. In those days, labor was 50 cents per day.
Yeah.
And he figured out he could cut and hand hew with an axe 6 cross ties a day. And a man offered him a dime a piece for them. So he figured out he could make 60 cents a day. So he started taking a cross-cut saw and sawing logs down and hewing out cross ties, and he would do 6 a day. And that's how he planned on paying for a 120-acre farm.
Wow.
He did pay for the farm, but he went on to, go into the lumber and the pulpwood business, which added to that. So the wood business, got him started and kept him afloat, and then obviously when he got the land cleared, they started farming it. But, that was a hard way to pay for a farm. People don't realize how much work it went into trying to buy something back then. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I know we had a little bank. I called it a little bank because it was just a one-room bank. And the funny thing about it is there was a big write-up in the newspaper one day. Now, this is a little country town, and they had a little shed out there alongside of it. There was a bank, grocery store, and a post office, and the store and post office is in the same building. And that was downtown. And some people broke into that little storage shed and took a pick and a sledgehammer out. It was emergency stuff. And they busted the door in on the bank. And they had some dynamite. And they blew the combination off of the safe with the dynamite, and they stole all the money that was in the bank. And in the paper, it says that they got away with $26 worth of 60-cent stamps. Whoa, that was a big thing, the $26 worth of 6-cent stamps was a lot, but when they found out that the reason there wasn't no money in the bank because the banker takes it home with him every night, and but he was well protected at home more than he was with that money when he was leaving it in the vault in the bank.
That's another story it tells about the way it was back then. I don't guess they would let the bankers take the money home with them in today's time, but back then I believe that was okay practice because it was your duty to protect the money, and it was a lot better to take it home with you and leave it in a vault that could be stolen.
Right. It was your bank. You could do what you want with it, that was really funny about that part. Back in the days, our parents always says, well, we had to walk 4 miles in the snow to get to school. In my days, I had to walk a half a mile a day in the snow. Now, the kids will take a taxi cab, they'll take their motor scooter, they'll take whatever convenience there is, and they'll ride it to school. And at the bus stop, I see down here a lot of people, they'll ride their bicycle to the bus stop and chain it up to a fence or something and get on the bus and go to school. But it's getting easier and easier, or should you say lazier and lazier for people.
I would say it's a lot easier today than the generations before it. You say this over and over that, each generation seems to have it easier.
Oh, yeah.
I say I had it easier than my dad. And I know my dad had it easier than my grandfather. So
oh, yeah.
That's true in family. Things get easier. And, like one of the things that I wanted to write my stories down about because, back in the good old days, our grandfathers would, we didn't have television, so the entertainment was listening to their stories. And we would go out on the front porch and we would listen to our grandfathers tell us stories, and, that was our excitement for the day. But, when my grandfather passed, a lot of the stories passed with him. And that's true in a lot of families. So what I wanted to do, and I also got involved in, writing and preserving the living history of North Alabama, because a lot of the older generations, they had stories about Alabama and Blount County, the county that I live in, that will never be in a history book. I've worked in our county to preserve the stories from families that will never be in a history book, and I call it the living history of Alabama, and that's been very important since I retired from teaching. I've been trying to work to promote the living history, and that's the real true stories that people actually lived it, that passed down. So I've encouraged all the people to write their stories down about their family and, some of the hardships they had, but also some of the opportunities and some of the good times that they had and some of the successes they had. We have a lot of successful businesses in Alabama, and, a lot of families started those businesses, so they need to write that down in their families so they can pass that down for several generations, because it will not be put in a history book, but it's the living history of Alabama, or in your case, it would be the living history of Florida.
Now, we were going back to some of the things, we had, and I'll ask you if you did too. Our first phone that we got was one of those little square boxes that hung on the wall with the little mouth cone coming out of it. And just like on Mayberry RFD, when the guy picked up the receiver in his hand and held it up to his ear and talked into the phone. And it had two batteries in it. And they had a wire that ran from where we lived to the operator station 3 miles away. And everybody that had a phone, they would have 3 party lines, and that was they would take one wire and run it all the way out, and then the 3 people that lived in line with that were all connected to that wire. So when somebody called you, they had a crank on the phone that you would crank, and the phone book would have listed Robert's number would be 2 longs, a short, and 1 long. And that's how you would ring their number. You'd crank that. 1 long one, and then 2 short ones, and then 1 long one. And you would hear that, and you'd know it was for you, so you'd answer the phone. And
right, you had three or four people on the phone if they wanted to just listen in. That was kind of unique that everybody was usually very respectful, and if it wasn't for you, you hung up so that you wouldn't be listening to talk.
And the weaker the other person started sounding on the phone, that meant the more people on your party line was picking up their phone. And
yeah, that was true.
Yeah.
Well, we lived in a time with, we did not have telephones, and we didn't even have a television. Matter of fact, I was 16 years old, and one of the stories in my book, this story is actually printed in the living history of North Alabama. One day I was mowing hay in a cab tractor which was air conditioned, and I was mowing in this field, and something just came to me of thoughts of, I cannot believe when I was 16 years old I was plowing a mule in this field raising cotton, and I was barefooted. And on that day, when I was 16 years old, I would have never dreamed I would be farming in an air-conditioned cab tractor. Well, I went back to that story, and when I was 16 years old, you was talking about telephones and televisions. I told my dad, I said, Dad, I think we would like to get a television. You know, our neighbors has got televisions, other children got televisions, but we don't have one. And he said, well, if you want a television, you go over and rent Mr. Blackwood's cotton allotment and plant 5 acres of cotton. If you make 5 bales of cotton, we will buy a television this fall. We went into the land, and that's how we got our first television. Now, how many today would go work all year and cultivate 5 acres of cotton just to buy a television? So I have a story in here in my book, and the name of it is I Know You Can, But I Don't Want to See You Kill a Good Mule Doing It. That's the story about when my neighbor thought I was going to plow a mule too long and kill it. So he came down and told me that I was going to finish the cotton patch, but I was going to kill a good mule doing it. And he came down and helped me finish to save the mule's life. So anyway, that's a funny story. That's one of the great stories in the book. Many people that's read that story and read my book, they always call back and they tell me about the story. It was really amazing how y'all got y'all's first television. But that's a true story. But also, you know, that made my daddy taught us if we work for something and we earn it, we value it a lot more. So we had to work for what we got. So there was a great lesson in that story.
I think, you know, the people back then, they get up before the sun, they go to bed after the sun goes down, and they worked all day. They worked 6 days a week, and Sunday they would all get up and get dressed and go to church.
That's right. Tradition.
And that's what kept people going, you know, because they go to church and they would thank God for what they had. They thank God for what He's helped them through and all this, and then they'd be refreshed and ready to go for another week. And I don't know anybody when I was little that didn't work 6 days a week on their farms, or some people had jobs in town where they'd only worked, you know, a normal 9 to 5, you know. At 5:15, you drive through town and everything's closed. Nothing is open. And
right, yeah.
And came out with this all these restaurants and stuff. So they had things where they had J.C. Penney's, they had Sears, and then they had Woolworths. And if you was lucky enough to be able to have enough money, you could go to Woolworths and sit at the little diner inside of it, a lunch or whatever. And it was just nothing fast. Was, you know, you go in, you sit down, you wait for them to cook your food. And today, people get so aggravated because they try to get through a drive-through, and some of these drive-throughs say, you know, we guarantee your food in 3 minutes. And then it takes them 4 minutes to get to the window, and they start complaining, and they spend 3 more minutes arguing about it.
Yeah.
You know.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, and they don't appreciate it, you know, that people have gone this far in the history to where you don't have to wait on anything. But back in the day, you waited on everything. You waited on your crops. You waited on your, you know, we had our own meat and our own garden, our own vegetables. We had our chickens. We had our eggs. So we had everything we needed. What do they got today? You know, they got to, we're out of this. We got to run to the store and buy it.
That's exactly the way it is. I mean, you know, we did not even go to the store very often. And I say in my book that if Walmart would have had to depend on my grandmother and granddaddy to go in and buy stuff to keep them open, they would go broke because they never did go to the grocery store. They raised everything, and they bought their flour and sugar off the rolling store once a month, and that's how they survived. Everything else they raised and put up themselves, lived off the land. But, you know, it's amazing. It took so much time in preparing and gathering your food, you know, but yes, you didn't have a big grocery bill for sure.
No, you didn't. I remember my mom and dad on payday. My mom stayed at home, and she canned a lot of fruits and preserves, stuff like that, and everything from the garden. She would work all winter or all summer putting that stuff up and canning and stuff. And when my dad he worked, he was a fireman, and when he'd come home on payday, and they'd sit at the table and they'd start putting money out in different little piles. You know, they'd count out so much. This is our rent, our house payment. They bought a 20-acre farm, and they'd count out, this is for groceries, and this pile here is for school books, things like that. And then they'd put it all together, and my mom would pay the bills. She'd mail most of it out. That was another thing, too. The mailman, that was awesome back then. The guy, he drove a Jeep, and one of them canvas-top Jeeps. And when you mail letters, if you didn't have any stamps, put a little dish in the mailbox and put 6 cents in it. And when he opened up the mailbox and got that letter and it didn't have a stamp on it, he'd look in the dish. If you put a dime in there, he would put a stamp on your envelope and put 4 cents back in your bowl. Your change. He would lick the stamp and put it on the envelope right there in the Jeep and then put it in his little satchel and go on. But
you know, it's amazing what the story you're telling. A lot of similarities to the story live right here. In our case, you know, I had a man to buy my book up in Indiana, and he read my book, and he called me on the telephone, and he said, you know, it's amazing that what you wrote about in your book is so much similarities to the way we actually were raised right here in Indiana. Y'all are in the South and we're in the North, but it's amazing how our lives were so much the same. True all over during that period. It don't matter where you're from. The lives before modern technology and conveniences was all about the same, really. So everybody pretty much had to do for themselves. Didn't have all the conveniences of air conditioning and cars and ways of traveling as we do today.
We had a fan. We had all windows open, and we had one of those big round fans. It looked like a table fan, but it was a lot bigger, and it rotated. And that thing looked like it was older than the hills when I remember it. But my mom, when we did get our television, it was black and white, you know, and the show just came on the air back in 57, Days of Our Lives or something like that, one of them soap operas. My mom waited, I don't know how long, for this show to air so she could start watching it. And that was my nap time. And that way I wouldn't be bothering her while she was watching this new program. And she'd put a blanket on the floor, and she would turn that fan on and blow air across me and make me take my nap for an hour while she watched the TV show. And then I'd get up, you know, and back then we lived 60 miles from the closest radio television station, and we had an antenna up on the side of the house. It was a 60-foot antenna. And if anybody don't know what an antenna is, it's like your cable wire only. You know, you'd have to look it up if you don't know what a TV antenna is. But we only got 3 channels, 2, 3, and 5, I believe it was. And we had to really get a good focus on that antenna to reach that radio station. And so, you know, it was all you can do, the static and everything coming in and out on it to watch anything. But, you know, and the running water, wow, you know, you see people that turn water on and then they'll go to the refrigerator and start getting stuff out to cook supper, and they just let the water run and run and run. They don't know what it means to save water, because we had a well. When we run out of water, we'd have to wait for it to rain, you know, to have water. And
save water.
Yeah. Yeah, you would use it first for this, and then use it for that, and then use it for something else, and then you'd take it out and give it to the hogs. Yeah.
Well, I have a little story in my book about our well. You know, we didn't have a pump in the well. We had a well that you would put a well bucket down in, and we had to draw all of our water.
Yeah, that's what we had. Yeah.
With a well witness, and I have a story in my book. It's one day we got into a little bit of mischief while my daddy was at work. My older brother, my cousins, and we all decided that we found a bunch of hickory nuts in the yard, and we decided that if we dropped these hickory nuts down into the well, it would make a sound and it would echo up the pipe. So we enjoyed that sound. So we started dropping hickory nuts down in the well. And eventually, they quit hitting water. They started making clicking sounds. So that meant so many was floating on top. The hickory nuts was not even getting to the water. And we just kept filling up the well. And before we know it, we had the well full of hickory nuts.
Yeah.
And that story is in the book. Now, many, many years later, we all laughed and talked about that day. The boys filled the well full of hickory nuts. But on the days that my dad came in from work and found the well full of hickory nuts, it was not too fun. That story is in the book, and it's a great story. It was about a child's way of learning something, and I guarantee no one ever had to tell us not to put hickory nuts in the well again. That was a great story. But my book is available. If you want to talk about how you can get my book.
Yeah, let us know how to get that.
My book is available on Amazon, and it's available at some stores. But if the stores like Books A Million, if they don't have the book on the shelves, they can order it and get it in one day. They can also order the book from my publisher, which is Tate Publishing Company. And if they would like a signed copy, they can mail me a letter or contact me over Facebook, and I will give them my address. It's 318 Faust Road, Blountsville, Alabama. And they can send me a letter, and they can, they can buy a signed copy from me. And but the book's available all over the United States, and it's actually available in Europe. So the book is available. Most stores are at Amazon. So I think the people would really enjoy reading it, because the younger people would actually find out how we did live way back then, and the older people can relate to it and say, yeah, that was the good old days. I remember it. So, that's kind of what we're trying to do with the book, and I think everybody will enjoy reading it.
Yeah. When I was talking to you last week, almost every story that you put in that book is somewhat the same way that I was raised up. And it brings back memories. And I think for listeners that want to compare their life with your life, and not necessarily, they don't have to be old, they don't have to be young, they could be any age, and enjoy listening to that. If you're young, you're going to see how we used to live back then. If you're old, you're going to reminisce in how you lived back then.
That's true. Just what you said is what I have emphasized when I'm doing speaking engagements and all that. It's a book for all ages. I actually go into the schools and read these stories to all ages in school, and they enjoy them. It's all the way up from, 10 or 11-year-old all the way up to 80 or 90. I told a lot of these stories, in assisted living homes, and they enjoyed them very much because they live the stories like that are in my book. Like you say, it's for every age group, and I think everybody will really enjoy it.
I know they will, because you got my attention with it when you was telling me about it, and I'm going to look for that book and see if I can get that. there's lots and lots of different writers out there, and once in a while you stumble across the good one, and then it's when I want to put them on my podcast and let everybody know about it. You know, as many people as it reaches, and you know, my podcast goes out worldwide. It's amazing how many people will listen to this, and you know, it's just, you know, it's a good way to explain something to somebody is over the internet, because everybody's got internet now. Back then we had when it was time. Today, when it was time for the farmer to come in and eat dinner, their wife would text them on their phone, say supper's ready. Back then, you had this big old case tractor you're sitting on behind it and whatever, and you listen for that dinner bell. And it's just crazy. I mean, I would really like to go back and live them days again. I really would. At a different age. I would like to be older. Yeah, I'd like to have the responsibility of owning the farm that we was on and doing the things that my parents did at the same time era that they lived in. I really would love that. So, yeah, the old coal stove, wood stove, coal stove, heating stove, you know, get up and get a good fire going at night, and then get up at 3 o'clock in the morning freezing your tail end off to put more coal in it. And that's awesome.
Ben, right there, my book has a lot of lessons in it. I actually sold a book to a gentleman about my age, and he bought the book, and about 2 weeks later I heard back from him, and he said, Mr. Woodard, do you have any more books? And I said, yeah, I have lots of books. He said, I want 6 of them. I'm buying one for each one of my grandchildren because there's some lessons in there they need to know, and I'm going to make it mandatory reading for them. This book's got some good lessons in it if people will read it. And
well, listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you don't lose out on any contact with me. We'll get this out to as many people as we can, and I just want to say, you know, God bless the people that come up with these books, because there's a lot of Christian people out there that are looking for good books to read. They're hard to find anymore. Once you see the cover and they open up to the first page, you say, well, can't judge this book by its cover. But, yes, you've got a book there that is excellent. And
yeah, when you notice my book, it's the front cover is actually black and white. That's just the way it was back then. We didn't make the front cover of it color. And, you know, I have a lot of fishing stories in my book, and also people might be of interest, and I know we may talk at length about this a little bit more some other time, but, you know, they might want to go to the YouTube channel and watch some of my fishing videos. You can go to Robert Earl Woodard YouTube Bass Fishing, and you can see a lot of my fishing videos on YouTube today. So, you know, some of you listeners might be interested in going to YouTube and watching some of my fishing videos. Our fishing videos has been on many television stations. The videos has been on Absolutely Alabama, Right This Minute, Amazing Acts of Science, and on Al Roper and the Good Morning America show. So their fishing videos has been all over too. So they're on the YouTube. If all they have to do is type in Robert Earl Woodard, it'll take you to the YouTube fishing videos. And some people that really like to fish, they might want to look that up also.
Okay. Well, we're going to see if we got anybody wants to comment back. They can leave a message in the comment section of this audio. And I'll try to get all that information on the notes, also how they can contact you, and so to find your book, all this, you know, I'll try to have all that on there. And in the meantime, you got another book started yet, or you want to start another one?
I'm working on one now. It's strictly about bass fishing.
Okay.
We plan on trying to get it completed within a year or so. It takes me about a year. Someone else might could do one faster, but I have one I'm wanting to get produced on bass fishing. So that will be my next book.
Now let me ask you a really important question here. Are you using a Royal typewriter, or are you using the internet, your computer, to type these stories out?
Well, I started out handwriting the stories because I did not know how to type. So actually, my son set me up on a computer, and that was the first time I ever used Microsoft Word. And I typed the book out one letter at a time.
There you go. One letter at a time. You use two fingers or just one hand?
I use one finger on my right.
Okay.
And I typed the book out one finger at a time.
But yeah,
that's very unusual. My son said, "Dad," he said, "it's unbelievable that you finished the book. What is really amazing that you typed it one finger at a time."
Nowadays, they just sit in front of the computer and talk to it, and it types it right out for them.
Well, the problem with that, the computer couldn't understand me. We're from Blount County, so we talk a little bit different than someone else, but the computer don't understand me.
Right. Well, listen.
I want to thank you for having me on your show today, and it's been really nice talking to you and talking to everyone about the book, the way it was back then, and we talked and exchanged our stories of how similar our lives were back then, in that time.
Right. Well, Robert, I've really enjoyed listening to you and talking about the old times. And God bless you and your family. And I hope that this next book is as interesting as all whatever else you've had. And that we just hope that somebody's going to buy this book. They're going to get interested. I know they will, because I did. And there's not too many books I can get interested in, but that's the way it is, But okay, so we've been talking to Robert Earl Woodard, and Blountsville, Alabama is where he's from. And so we just I just congratulate him for the jobs well done that he's been through in his lifetime, and it was nice enough to write about it, because history is history, whether it's in Blountsville or if it's in Nebraska or New York, wherever it's at. If you can sit down and write your history, that is amazing, because people are looking for things like that. And so we'll have you back on there. I definitely want to hear some more about your fishing book and talk about that. So I just appreciate you being on here today. So
yeah, thank you. We're certainly excited about our book the way it was back then. It's been very exciting, and we met a lot of interesting people through our tour of when we had our book signings. And we're also excited about our fishing videos, and we're just glad and hope everyone can enjoy them. And that was what it's all about.
Okay. Well, there you go. So we're gonna go ahead and end this audio and see what happens from there. Thank you again, and it's been a real pleasure talking with you. We will get in contact with you again, and this is Reverend James Wesley from Spreaker.com radio, and we hope everybody enjoyed this episode today. So thank you.